Pokémon, one of, if not the biggest franchise in the world, just below Mickey Mouse and Disney as a whole. We all know how the game started on the Nintendo Game Boy with Pokémon Red and Pokémon Blue, spread into TV shows, trading cards, merchandise, stores, and so much more. But there was one game that was so perfect that to this day, it is still my favorite Pokémon game ever made. If we move back to pre-2014, I didn't like Pokemon. I didn't like any Nintendo franchises that weren't Mario. Mario was the best franchise out of all of them. Why the hell would I like any other one? Mario was my passion. From trying to complete New Super Mario Bros. Wii to waiting for Super Mario 3D World, a game that I predicted would come out a year before, I had my whole life revolving around that stupid little red plumber and his little brother Luigi. But one day in 2014, my friend made this gaming channel where he played Pokémon Leaf Green on a Game Boy Advance emulator. I did get a bit annoyed that he pretended like he had discovered emulators and he's like the only person in the world who knows about this secret little thing called emulators when I knew what an emulator was. I feel like the whole world knows what emulators are, but that's neither here nor there. The point was, I watched the entire video from start to finish and was extremely interested to play the game myself. So that's what I did. I downloaded a Game Boy Advance emulator. I had played a little bit of the Game Boy Advance before because I do have a Game Boy and a Game Boy Color, and I'd played the Super Mario Advance series and Mario Pinball, don't know if you've heard of it, but I wanted to try specifically Pokemon Leaf Green. So I played it. I played Pokemon Leaf Green and I loved it. I loved every part of it. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was amazing. I had lots of fun playing the game, going from gym to gym, catching Pokemon. I never completed the game. Oh no, I would never complete a Pokemon game, or any game for that matter. But it got me into trying other Pokemon games. I tried Pokemon Black, I tried Pokemon Y, I tried Pokemon Omega Ruby, I tried Pokemon Sun and Moon, I have both. And even Pokemon Go and Let's Go Pikachu. But nothing hit the same as Pokemon Leaf Green for the Game Boy Advance. But as I look onto my past of playing Pokemon Leaf Green, there's one thing that just sticks out like a sore thumb. I've never completed a Pokemon game. I got close with Pokemon Black and Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu, but never with Pokemon Leaf Green. And that's the best one, in my opinion. So how have I never completed it? So I decided to load up Pokemon Leaf Green to see if I can complete it. The day started with me picking my name, he's Mario, and my rival's name, Egg. I didn't have enough letters to put the I in Mario, hence his Mario. I don't need to explain that. Professor Oak introduces us to the world of Pokemon and his Mario plays an NES in his room. After talking to people, his Mario decides that he wants to explore the world, but Professor Oak stops him. He's now given one of three choices: Charmander, Squirtle, or Bulbasaur. My choice, despite playing Leaf Green, has and always will be Charmander. Charmander is just amazing. I rename him to Charzy, and me and him have the best of times. Charmander may not be terribly helpful when you go through the first gym, but the more you get into the game, you'll be more happy that you picked a Pokemon that turns into a Charizard. After I picked good old Charmander, I fought Egg for the first time. I won, obviously, and from my knowledge I knew all you had to do was keep picking Scratch, because eventually I win. That's kind of what you do whenever you start a Pokemon game. Who cares about those other attacks like Tail Whip or whatever? Scratch attacks the other Pokemon. It must be the only good attack I can do until I get Ember at level 7. I got to the point where I got a Pokédex, as you do when you start playing a Pokemon game, as well as some Pokeballs, so I knew what to do. You know that little moneymaker that prints money for the Pokemon Company, Game Freak and Nintendo? Well, I know where you can get him. Off to the forest I go. Look, I found one. How exciting. Now I can literally print money whenever I so choose. Isn't that fun, gamers? You may be asking yourself, why did I get a Pikachu? I mean, I know it's the big symbol of Pokemon, but like what's the point? Well, let me tell you. Pikachu has lightning. Lightning is useful when fighting Pokemon, most of the time. When Moneymaker over here becomes evolved, then all hell will break loose. I hope you're excited to see that. I think it's time to grind. Don't you agree? I love grinding. Just fighting different trainers, using the different Pokemon to fight said trainers. It really makes the Pokemon evolve. I got Moneymaker and Charzy to a respectable level to leave the forest and journey through the rest of Pokemon. So I fought Egg one more time, because why not? And then journeyed out into the world of Pokemon. Did you hear about the gyms in every Pokemon town? Well, if you didn't, here's a really weird explanation. Pokemon gyms are like real life gyms. You go to the train. except all you really do is defeat the gym leader, who owns the gym or whatever. Then you get a little badge. 8 of these little badge things makes it possible for you to go up against the Elite Four and the Pokemon Champions. Your goal is to defeat these fools and become the Pokemon Master of the region that you're in. So what did I do as a completely ill-prepared Pokemon man? I just went for it. Each gym has a little henchman that stands around in it along with the gym leader, so I decided to test my skills on that little man. And to my surprise, I actually won against him. How the hell is that possible? He's just a little tiny doo-doo man, but my silly funny Charzy destroyed his butt off. Maybe I can defeat the gym leader without preparing whatsoever. Maybe that's something I can do. No more fighting level 4 Pidgeys for me. I'm going to become the Pokemon Master fighting against the highest level Pokemons in the entire world. I can do this. I am the Pokemon Master. Oh my god. I defeated his first Pokemon. Maybe I can do this. I can do this. I'm ready to get my very first gym badge. I'm gonna do it, people. I'm gonna do it. Oh. You got me in one attack. That's it? Game over? I know I can get this stupid little gym badge even if it's the last thing I do. You're going down, gym leader. I'm going to put an end to your madness. I'm going to become the Pokemon Master of Pokemon Leaf Green for the Game Boy Advance.
Come tend the garden with me. We have so many seeds to sow. When the harvest comes in, it will be time to share what we have grown. We were having the time of our lives when we started.
What was your first Pokemon game? Mine was Pokemon Leaf Green, and to this day I still think it's the best Pokemon game out of all of them. Why is that? Well, watch the video and see. So what happened before? Well, Gizmodo and Egg were rivals, but we were chosen by Professor Oak to get some Pokemon. Also, Egg is Professor Oak's grandson. I chose Charmander and named him Charzy. I then caught some more Pokemon, like Moneymaker, and fought the first gym leader, but lost. Now that we're all caught up, Pokemon Green and Red were released in Japan in 1996. Oh, what a big day that was. There was a Pokemon anime, Pokemon cards, Pokemon toys, pretty much anything you can think of. There was a Pokemon version of it. Japan was crazy for Pokemon, and Nintendo, well, they were getting all the money as well as Creatures and Game Freak. Because they made the Pokemon games. And made the Pokemon Company. But, you know. So what did they do? They made Pocket Monsters Blue. Pocket Monsters is Pokemon. That's what it means, by the way. Pokémon Monsters Blue was an upgrade to the first two games, fixing bugs and all that fun stuff, but it was first only released as part of the Koro magazine, but would later be fully released in 1999. But now, Nintendo had the problem they had to release Pokemon in the West and the rest of the world. How could this be done? Is this even possible? Well, it is, through all the marketing, of course. If you had Pokemon, you were cool. There were special edition Game Boys and there was just all this stuff. And the best thing, possibly even the weirdest thing, was that Pokemon released on the regular Game Boy when the Game Boy Color was released? What are you doing? What? The Game Boy was the hottest portable out there, and with Pokemon Gold and Pokemon Silver actually taking advantage of the color, Pokemon Yellow kinda did it. Pokemon really hit its stride, but Nintendo knew it was time for an upgrade. They'd basically been sitting on the same technology since the late 80s when they released Tetris with the Game Boy. And Super Mario Land also came out, but no one cares. Look, I could look back on the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color, and that's something I'll probably do later on. But here, we need to talk about the Game Boy Advance. How does this relate to Leaf Green? Well, A, it released on the Game Boy Advance, and B, Leaf Green and Fire Red, the non-superior one, are remakes of the first two Pokemon games, named after the Japanese release because we didn't get a Green in the rest of the world, only Japan got Green. Oh well. Of course, I don't have a Game Boy Advance, I have a DS Lite that you can chuck a Game Boy Advance game in because it has a little slot at the bottom. But I don't have a normal one, but that's fine, I still like the game. It's one of the best consoles for Nintendo games, unless you want a 2D Mario game, then I guess you're gonna have to wait until the re-release of Super Mario Advance 4 on the Wii U to get an original Mario game for the Game Boy Advance, but still. It's one of the best consoles along with the GameCube. GameCube, awesome. I could look over the entire library of both those consoles, but let's just talk about Pokemon because that's the point of the video. Gizmodo scurried to a Pokemon Center protecting the exhausted and fainted Pokemon from further harm. Maybe Egg was right. Maybe I can't become the Pokemon Master. I let the nurse at the Pokemon Center revive my Pokemon. She told me how good they look, which is honestly the nicest compliment I've ever heard. And then I decided that maybe I should just go for a walk around. I met this guy, who brought me once again back to the gym as if I didn't know where I was. Does this guy think I'm an idiot? What's his problem? Whatever. He disappeared into an abyss, so I decided that I would go get some potions. You see, when playing Pokemon, one of the most important things to buy is potions. If your Pokemon is ever low on health, buying potions is the best possible thing you can do to help them survive. It's very important when you begin to grind, which is what I decided to do. I wanted my Charzy to be evolved. That's what any good Pokemon trainer wants in their life. At least that's what I think they want in their life. So I fought Pidgeys one by one, defeating them with a simple Ember. Funny thing about Ember, that's one of the main reasons why I always choose a fire type. See, most Pokemon games let you begin with a fire type, so that's what I did. I mostly do it in every single Pokemon game, unless there's some other type that's just way too irresistible to not pick the fire type. I would do a tier list for the video, but I think we may have to wait a little longer to bore you with that type of content. Anywho, I keep training my Pokemon as much as I possibly could until I felt I could finally go up against the gym leader. The gym leader was a rock type, which makes it a bit difficult against a fire and electric type. I know that, but that's the problem with the gyms. You're going to eventually come up against some Pokemon that you can't actually fight. So how do I combat this? Well, I could trade myself a Squirtle or a Bulbasaur or something from a different game then go up against him, but I want to use Charzy and Moneymaker, goddammit. But I have another problem. You see, I'm not a big RPG guy. I hate grinding for things. I like just playing through a game like Super Mario Odyssey and not having to worry about grinding to get a certain moon. In that game, all you have to do is go around to random locations and collect moons. Pretty simple, isn't it? Whereas in this game, and pretty much every mainline Pokemon game, you have to grind and grind and grind and grind endlessly, which I'm not a big fan of. I've never been a big fan of it. I don't know why. I don't know what set me on this path, but I'm always going to be more of a Mario guy. So this is why this game is my favorite Pokemon game, which doesn't really make any sense. It should be something like Pokémon Tournament for the Wii U, because you don't have to grind. At least I don't think so, I haven't played it in a while. Well, logically on what I told you, yeah, it should be my favorite, but it isn't. You see, Pokemon Leaf Green, at least early in the game, doesn't really need a lot of grinding, and it doesn't take that much time. If you just brute force it, you can eventually defeat the gym leader. It doesn't matter how long it takes you, you can do it. So that's really what I did. I only really wanted to evolve my Charzy a little bit. I mean, come on, look at this fight, I'm not even evolved yet. That shouldn't be a problem, right? Right? Well, I'm sorry to say, but it seems as it is. I can fight this Onyxor the live long day, but he's got Rock Tomb, my worst enemy. And with just very few hits, he destroyed Moneymaker and Charzy. I'm finished. How will I defeat this stupid gym leader? There's gotta be a way to do it. I believe there's a way to do it. Let me think. While that happens, let's travel to an alternate universe. Hey you stupid losers, it's me, here's Luigi. Wanna play Pokemon Fire Red? I opened the game by choosing my name. I decided to go with Hismaro just for the fun of it because it's like the alternate version of my name. My rival of course is Timtom. In case you don't remember, he challenged me to a fight all the way back in 2018. So he's my rival.
Would you fight Hismaro in the undercard of the LA boxing match?
I mean, is that even a question? Of course.
I decided to choose a Bulbasaur and name him Bulbsy because why not? No one picks Bulbasaur, so I kind of feel bad for him, you know? And I know I'm playing Fire Red, but I gotta pick my main man, Bulby. Or Bulbsy. Bulby would have made more sense. Now I gotta travel to the main town, deliver a package back to Pallet Town, then go back again. Now, in order to speed this up, I'm just gonna use an emulator because they can do that. It makes grinding very easy. I love grinding in RPGs. I'm kind of an RPG guy. Let's go up against the first gym. This was such a breeze. One of the easiest things I think I've ever done. Pokemon is one of the easiest games I think I've ever played. I don't even know why you care about this experience. Yeah, okay, that guy thinks he's so good. Well, you know what? I know how to defeat the gym leader. Let's just brute force it. I'm gonna fight that stupid leader until I win. I can do this. I'm gonna do it. Let's go. What happened? Hello? Did the video cut off? I won, but why is there no footage of me winning? What happened?
'Cause I won't stop now. Ooh, baby, I will hold my ground. No, no, I won't stop now. I'll keep on fighting till your love comes around.
Pokemon Leaf Green was right at the end of a slump for Pokemon that was created ever since the first game. However, the Pokemon Company figured out what the problem was and fixed everything for the next game, making Pokemon Leaf Green the most important Pokemon game ever released.
Pokemon is now in full mania.
If it sounds like the kids are speaking another language, they are.
Pokemon the movie joins Pokemon the video game.
Pokemon in the 90s was huge. From the launch in Japan of Pokemon Red and Pokemon Green, to the launch in America with Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue. Don't know why they're different. Everyone and their grandmother knew who that little yellow mouse was. The development of the first generation of Pokemon led to a Pokemon anime, as well as a Pokemon Yellow game, which was kinda like the anime, but also kinda like the game, with all 151 Pokemon in it. Not including Missing though. I'm sorry. All taking place in one small area inside of a little tiny Game Boy cartridge. Here is a Pokemon Japanese Yellow cartridge. Look how tiny this thing is. When you compare it to other games that released at the time, like this one, you can see that they managed to fit an entire giant game into this little thing. After finishing the first game, the second game, Pokemon Gold and Silver, was immediately greenlit and in development. The game was first announced at Nintendo Space World in 1997, which was a little convention that Nintendo ran every year in Japan. These games weren't just another version of Pokemon Red and Blue, oh no. These games were completely different. They featured an all new set of Pokemon. Featured color, wasn't announced at the time yet, and so many other things. But one of the biggest things added was backwards compatibility with the first games. This was the selling point for Pokemon Gold and Silver. Well, one of the selling points of the game. The game was supposed to be released after the first season of the Pokemon anime ended. This would have been the perfect time to release the game. Nothing would have stopped them from releasing the game at this time. It just makes perfect sense. It's brand synergy, right? Right? Pokemon Stadium was the first real spin-off to the Pokemon series, and it was on the Nintendo 64. You know, like this thing? Not only that, but Game Freak were running low on money. Again, they were running low on money when they made the first games as well. If Game Freak had no money, there was obviously no Pokemon Gold and Silver. Obviously, they still had money to survive. It's not like they were dead broke. But they needed a solution, and that solution wasn't Pokemon. Let me introduce you to a guy named Junichi Masuda. Remember the guy from the intro of this very video? Hold on. Yeah. Pokemon. You see that guy right there? That's him. That's the guy I was talking about. He's the chief creative fellow at the Pokemon Company. No, I'm not saying fellow as a joke. His official title actually uses the word fellow. Anyway, Masuda was born in Japan and played the trombone. Doesn't sound related yet, but we're getting there. While learning music, he was drawn to some of the classical music that everyone knows, like Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring and Shostakovich's Symphony No. 5. Yeah, I know what they are. Bet you don't. Loser! I remember The Rite of Spring being interesting, like the story behind it. I'm not going to talk about that. This isn't a music channel. But Masuda also had another passion, computer graphics. He went to go work at Game Freak in 1989, and he worked on almost every single project they made. Game Freak at the time was a pretty new company. Apparently they were like a magazine company before, I don't know, I saw some YouTube video one time say that, so it might be true, I don't know. And they hadn't really made anything huge. Look, I don't think Yoshi NES was the biggest NES game of all time. That was developed by Game Freak, fun fact, like a puzzle game, but Yoshi. There's an egg at the bottom, and then there's a bunch of things that appear on screen, and then the egg falls down and you control Mario at the bottom or whatever. Or is that a different game? I don't know. However, Game Freak knew that they had something up their sleeves. They just needed to release it, but they needed money. As I said, it's a common theme for Game Freak. So they needed to make sure Pokemon at the time, and technically still known as Pocket Monsters, was good. It took him and the rest of the team years, literally 6 years, to develop Pokemon Red and Green, while also making other games as Yoshi. And these other games were used to fund the development process of Pocket Monsters Red and Green. They started Pokemon at around the beginning of the Game Boy's lifespan, like after it released, not, in like 1990. If it released in 1996 and you go back 6 years, that's like 1990. Maths. But when they finally released it, Game Boy sales in Japan were on a decline. See, Japan was their main place that they were going to sell the game. They didn't even think about an English localization yet. It was Japan. And if the Game Boy was not selling well in Japan, then what the hell are they supposed to do? People in the industry that were friends of Masada were telling him, this is a bad idea. Do not release Pokemon on the Game Boy. No one's going to buy it. This could have been bad for Game Freak. But they still trusted themselves. Masada worked on a lot of the soundtrack and like the sound effects. Pretty much all the sound you hear in Pokemon Red and Green was done by him. And he did a little bit of programming as well. Fun fact, while developing the game, and some other Pokemon games, almost all of the data was removed because of like a computer failure, which is kind of insane. It could have been completely lost and we'd never have what we have today. It's like the Toy Story 2 thing, if you've heard of it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it. The signs in the universe were pointing to Pokemon being a disaster. But finally, they got to the point where they could release the game, and they did! And it was a success, leading to everything that I mentioned earlier. But now they had an even bigger task, developing Pokemon 2. Technically like 5 by the time it came out, because Red, there's 1, Green 2, Blue 3, Yellow 4, Gold 5, and Silver 6, I don't know. What could the follow-up to Pokemon be? Game Freak had to think quick. The original release date was set for 1997, with a price yet to be decided. That's literally what it says on the Nintendo website. The game was intended for a release on the original Game Boy, the DMG ones, and the Super Game Boy, the SNES add-on where you can put a Game Boy in an SNES. It adds colour, but also you can play it on the big screen. That's the main selling feature. And the title was revealed to be Pokemon 2 Gold and Silver. Or Pokemon Gold and Silver 2. The 2 cover is up. Look at the logo. What's the actual title supposed to be? They announced all these new features in the game, such as skateboards, pre-evolution state of Gen 1 Pokemon, clock function. That's what it says, clock function. It's the day and night cycle. Genders for Pokemon, because there was only Nidoran, and they had 2 different versions of Nidoran, but now they're doing it with all the Pokemon. But most of the time they don't have a different version. I don't know, they got bored one day. 100 new Pokemon. That's pretty big. More HMs and TMs. Hidden moves and TMs. And backwards compatibility with the first games. They also appointed Masada as sub-director of Pokemon 2, Gold and Silver. As I mentioned earlier, the release of Pokemon Gold and Silver was meant to be when the anime ends. And if you watch the anime, at least the first episode of the anime, you'd know the connection. At the start of Season 1, Ho-Oh, a new Pokemon, makes its first appearance in any Pokemon media ever. This was the perfect tie-in. How good was that? Surely it's coming out soon, right? Wrong. Completely and utterly wrong. The game was then announced for the end of 1997, which, to be fair, Season 1 of the anime wasn't over yet, but Season 1 of the anime also goes for like 1 billion episodes. Jump to November and demos are finally available to play. However, it seems the game's now coming out in March 1998. Another delay, but this wouldn't be the end of the troubles. Oh no, it's just the beginning.
An investigation's underway in Japan into why more than 600 children suffered from convulsions and vomiting after watching a television cartoon.